surprise you. Annette attempts to rise to any challenge that comes her way, and has, because of her journey so far, experience in many very different areas, and may just be a candidate for the best person to bring with you on a desert island. But that is another story for another day. I can vouch to that, though. Today, her speech title is Caleb. Her speech objectives are to inspire the audience by appealing to noble motives and challenging the audience to achieve a higher level of beliefs or achievements, and to appeal to the audience's needs and emotions using stories, anecdotes, and quotes to add drama, and 3, to avoid using notes. So this is speech number 10 in the Competent Communicator. The time is 8 to 10 minutes. Let's welcome Annette.
Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and guests. This is my son, Caleb. It's a few years ago. He is still just as handsome and smart and strong. He is as ready to lend you a helping hand as he is to take part in almost any adventure. When he was 16, he knew he wanted to become a hotshot. A hotshot is somebody that jumps out of small airplanes or helicopters and fights wildland fires in the middle of nowhere. It didn't come as a big surprise to us when several months before his 18th birthday, he had turned his application in to the Salt Lake Wildland Fire Department. And of course, he got an interview and got set for the hiring tests. Add to this background of him is that he is probably the most competitive person that I know. When he was on his high school swimming team, the swimming coach said, "Okay, I have a bottle of chocolate milk. Whoever can swim the furthest on one breath hold will win this." Well, he swam further than anybody else and blacked out because he held his breath too long. They had to call the paramedics and resuscitate him. But he won the coveted bottle of chocolate milk. Well, that year he joined the Salt Lake Wildland Fire Department, and he had a couple of exciting years, some close calls, but all in all it was good. Towards the end of the second year, he was on a fire in Idaho, and in the very steep mountains, and he and another buddy of his were cutting and fighting the fire when a big 4-foot diameter log on fire rolled over them. It crushed his helmet, gave him a deep laceration in his arm from the axe he was carrying, and his buddy's shoulder was turned to mush. He continued to hike out to where the fire rig was, and then his pupils blew, and they had to life flight him to the Boise hospital. Because of the severity of the accident, they of course gave him all the tests and all the scans you could possibly imagine. As he's recuperating, the doctor on call comes and says, "Well, I have good news and bad news. The good news is you did not sustain any brain damage from the accident. The bad news is there's a lot of scarring on your brain, and it looks like you have a fast-moving degenerative disease." We immediately found out and were alerted about his accident, but not his disease. He was later diagnosed with something called adrenoleukodystrophy. The short version of what that is that it strips the myelin sheath off from your brain cell nerves, and it creates chaos, basically. And his initial prognosis was 24 months at best. Since there was no cure, Caleb opted not to have any conventional medical treatment. He is, besides being competitive, very stubborn. He's always done things his own way, and once he makes his mind up, there's no changing it. Obviously, Caleb eventually told us, but not for 6 months, when it became impossible for him to hide the symptoms. He had already had a hard time walking, but we didn't realize that because that was something that was pretty common when he worked out too hard or ran too far. At this point, he could no longer run, climb, anything, swim that was physically exhaustive. And within a few short weeks of him telling us, he had a hard time even making it out of bed without a cane. Making it from the bedroom to the living room was a huge struggle. He had to wear dark sunglasses, even inside, because his pupils didn't dilate anymore. He also had a hard time eating. His short-term memory was affected to the point where if you told him something that was going to happen tomorrow or the next week, he didn't remember. He had frequent seizures that kept him in a lot of pain, along with especially his right quad and other parts of his body would keep cramping for hours. It was really hard to see him in pain, but for me, almost harder was watching him turn from a young, strong teenager in a short time to an old man that had a harder time walking than my dad after his stroke at 80. Almost every aspect of Caleb's life was impossible and hard for him to deal with, but he still didn't want any help or to be treated any differently. For me, it was unbearably anger-making that there was absolutely nothing I could do at this point, nothing. But I did what I love to do. I started doing some research. I started digging and finding out everything I could about adrenoleukodystrophy. I even pored over some medical dissertations and things that were written by medical professionals for medical professionals. It'd take me an hour to 2 to just get through a page. And then we started doing, research from other people that had had the same or similar disease. The thing that seemed to show the most promise was in the area of diet. So we helped him completely change his diet. We found out that things like sugar, gluten, dairy, red meat, alcohol, spinach, apple peels, food additives, and too much salt could set off a seizure. So we cut all these things out, added some oil supplements, and within, again, a relatively short time, he started having less seizures. He also started to be able to move more. He would get out of his room, out of his bed for longer periods of time. He found a Feldenkrais therapist that helped him relearn to use his muscular system in a different way. And after several months on the new diet, his eyes started working again. His memory isn't perfect, but it is much better. Caleb has also always inspired unity in those around him. And he had the good fortune of having people praying for him from many different areas. He had priests, Tibetan monks, shaman, other holy men, people in temples and prisons, all came together, about as diverse of a group, praying for him as you could hope to have. It's been over 4 years since he was originally diagnosed, and he is still alive and thriving at this point. Yes, his life looks a lot different than we expected. He has to stick to a very strict diet and still try to eat 5,000 to 6,000 calories a day because that's the amount of energy his body requires. But he now lives in Oregon on a horse farm with his girlfriend, and they grow organic vegetables. He helps train horses and even fells an occasional tree. In fact, he just came back from rowing a raft through the Grand Canyon. I don't know if I believe in God, but I thank her nonetheless for his life and his health. You never know what tomorrow is going to bring, nor do you know what miracles life will grant. Will I have a son tomorrow? I don't know. Will the deceased come back with a vengeance? I don't know. Will he have another miracle and be completely cured? I don't know that either. But I know that he inspires me to live my life to the fullest and never give up. The following quote fits Caleb to a T, and I hope it's a message all of you can take to heart. Life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in an attractive and well-preserved body, but rather to skid in sideways, chocolate in one hand, champagne in the other, body thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and screaming, "Woohoo! What a ride!"